G'day ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be covering the absolute basics before we get into actually doing some real tutorials, namely getting started. So in this, I'm going to cover three subjects. First, materials, second, programs, and third, skills. Regarding materials, essentially, I'm dividing it into three categories. The first is the must-haves. The things that you must have to be able to, well, first of all, participate in these tutorials, and second of all, do anything professionally. You must have something to create with. Essentially, even if it's, pen and paper, as long as you can work and practice. Speaking of which, the second thing is you must have patience and practice, time to practice. That's the third thing, time. Ooh. As you can see, it's really, fairly inexpensive to get the must-haves, but they are the most time-consuming and difficult things to learn properly. Next are the might-wants. The might-wants of working professionally and artistically. These are things that help, they speed the process, they make things better. You don't have to have them, but it's very, very good to. A computer, first and foremost. Now, I'm assuming you have that covered because you're watching this. Otherwise, I don't know how you would, but whatever. Anyways, so yes, that's obviously, you might want a computer. It will definitely speed up the process if you're working professionally. But the other thing a lot of people have a lot of questions about is a tablet. Do you need a tablet? You don't have to have a tablet. There are people who work professionally without using tablets, but you might want one. It is essentially the equivalent of using a pen to draw on a pad, whether it be just a plastic pad while you look at the screen or an LCD screen that you draw on. I highly recommend anything by Wacom. They're the industry standard. There's lots of support for them and they're very, very well made. Next, the cool stuff. This is stuff that is pretty much entirely, optional, but, it helps. The first one's kind of mundane. It's one of these things. It's what they call a smudge guard. They're for tablet users. So if you're using a Wacom tablet, I never had one up until a week ago, but ever since I've been using it, I'm like, why have I not always used it? It just kind of makes movements smoother. Mainly for people who use Cintiqs or LCD tablets. Otherwise, it's totally optional. It's also good for left-handers who draw traditionally. Next is a book by Richard Williams, and it's called The Animator's Survival Kit. It is a fantastic book. You need to get it. I have it in the other room. I should have bought it here for the video, but I didn't. It's brilliant. And even if you don't want to be an animator, it covers things like, squash and stretch and timing and pacing and perspectives and everything that you can use in context aside from animation. But overall, the book is just brilliant and it's a must-have, or cool stuff at least. I already did must-have, so I just contradicted myself. The third thing is connections. It's cool to have connections in the sense that when I say connections, I mean like accounts on things like, DeviantArt and Newgrounds and stuff. The reason why that's good to have is, first of all, feedback. You're constantly, getting feedback from people who can help you improve your own work. Second of all, inspiration. You're seeing things that are really good. I absolutely recommend newgrounds.com. It's a fantastic source for games, animations, art, and music. And if you're an animator, you've got royalty-free music there that you can use, or meet, game designers and make a game, even if you never have. I live off of making games, and I never made games until I went to Newgrounds. And everyone I've ever worked with, I met at Newgrounds. So it's a really great place to go. Programs. Programs. Yes. So the basics, essentially, well, I wouldn't say basics, but industry standards are Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Flash. They're both very different programs. Photoshop is for images only, but it's an extremely powerful program to, manipulate and create images from scratch. It's raster based, so it's not vector. but you can work at extremely high resolutions, and most artists use that. Flash is an animation program, and it is also used for game design and multimedia. Now, the reason I recommend Flash and not solely an animation-based program like Toon Boom is simply because of the versatility and compatibility with the internet, and it's and the fact that you can make games with it, and it's got a lot of support. A lot of people can help you out if you have trouble with it. There are substitutes. There are programs that you can get if you don't want those, or if you want to not spend money. So there's a few listed there. Just essentially all you do is Google. I just found them through Google. I know Toon Boom is highly recommended for those who really want to get into serious animation. But otherwise, look, Flash and Photoshop are what I'm going to be using in all of my tutorials. So it is fairly expensive, but if you can afford it, it's a very wise investment. But if you're very young and starting off, you'll have to find a way to get it. Skills. The basic approach to skills is to kind of have super awesome drawing skills. Oh, I'm not making sense. Photoshop. When I say skills, I mean to be able to participate in the tutorials that I'm going to be showing. They're made for more intermediate users, not so much complete beginners. I'm not going to be going through the absolute basics. So if you're going to start off through watching this series, you're going to have a basic knowledge of tools and use of layers in Adobe Photoshop. So that way, when I do future tutorials using Photoshop, it should be fairly easy to follow along. Just kind of learn the basics on your own first. I'll post a link in the description to some tutorials on Photoshop and Adobe Flash. Flash I'm going to be using more in the tutorials because I'm very comfortable with the way the vector draws. Vector meaning something that you can zoom in. It's not limited to the limitations that a raster or bitmap image has. But you will need to know a little bit more if you're going to follow along with Flash. You need to know a basic knowledge of the tools. So obviously the drawing tools and things like that. But it gets a little more intense. So things like keyframes and the timeline, symbols and graphics and how they work, and putting things inside them, and how those properties work, and how the library works, and working things in the library. It might seem a little daunting to beginners at first, but if you just take it really slow, again, link in the description, go to the tutorials, just kind of ebb your way through it, and don't try and do something super huge for your first project. Do something little just to learn something small, and just do that bit by bit. So they're essentially the skills that you would want to have to begin following along with this. That's the end of this lesson. There's really not much else to go through, but I just wanted to have one of the first videos on the channel to essentially cover the very basics of what we need to get going. So that's it. Thanks for joining. I hope you enjoyed this video. Links are below to download the original files for reference. Remember, if you animate or draw something cool, be sure to share it on newgrounds.com, the internet's best source for animations, games, art, and music. Until next time, see you later.